U975 FM, Hot Like Pepper, Multicultural Radio.
Power to the listeners.
And a very good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago, and thanks for staying with us here at 97.5 FM, Hot Like Pepper. I am Kenrick Juggernaut. Let's take a look at some of the stories that are trending to the 3 o'clock hour. Good afternoon. The Ministry of Health said there are currently 2,063 known active cases of COVID-19 in the country. According to the ministry's update, more people tested positive for the virus and will be processed for admission at the discretion of the Chief Medical Officer. The ministry said in a revised update that the death toll stands at 65. The ministry added to date 29,183 samples had been submitted for testing, with 26,120 unique tests and 3,063 repeated tests. The total number of known positive cases stands at 3,930. Police have arrested a 43-year-old man after marijuana was allegedly found in his vehicle. In a statement issued, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service said the man from Laventille was arrested yesterday in Toko after a quantity of cannabis was found in his vehicle. Police said the arrest took place during a road check exercise conducted between 4:30 p.m. and 7:20 p.m. in the Toko Police District. 4 men are now in police custody following a police operation in Barataria this morning after a quantity of ammunition was found and seized. The men were detained at around 3 a.m. at a house along 7th Avenue, Barataria. The house was searched and the ammunition was found and seized. As a result, the 4 men who were in the home at the time were detained for questioning following an increase in violence last week. Opposition leader Kamala Persad-Bissessar is calling on Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley to reveal government's plans for Petrotrin. She said it's been 2 years since the Prime Minister assured that the state-owned oil company would not be closed, but the once vibrant energy hub remains idle and closed. She noted that the refinery was to be sold to Patriotic Energies, which is owned by the OWTU, yet nearly 1 year later, government is no longer closer to making that deal a reality. Persad-Bissessar also took note that the Prime Minister on the campaign trail in July said the deal would be finalized within a matter of days, but that has not materialized. That's a look at some of the stories that are trending to the 3 o'clock hour right here on 975 FM Hot Like Pepper. Note that details of these and much more can be heard in our 4 o'clock newscast. Stay with us here as we continue to keep you informed. Up next is our discussion with Dr. Bo Tiwari, a former government minister, and Ved Sriram, banker and economist. Stay with us here, 975 FM, Hot Like Pepper.
Republic Day. On U975 FM, we celebrate with you as we present One Nation, One Love, One People. It all goes down Republic Day, Thursday, 24th September 2020, from 6 a.m. to midnight. Strictly DJs, strictly local music, strictly vibes, and strictly the best. One Nation, One Love, One People. Look out! From 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., Sharon and DJ Vishal. 9 a.m. to noon, Beast Hi-Fi. 12 noon to 3 p.m., Captain Kendall. 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., the DJ Flavio Experience. 6 to 9 p.m., DJ Sean. And 9 p.m. to midnight, Corky D. Log on to www.975radio.com. Check us out on Facebook at U975 Multicultural Radio. This Republic Day on U975 Hot Like Pepper Multicultural Radio, a member of the Rhythms Communications Network.
KY's Electrical Supplies Limited of Southern Main Road, Canupia, for all your plumbing and electrical supplies, water heaters, filters and water pumps, plus all parts for Gould, Pentax and Leo pumps. Choose from leading brands such as Cooper, Varma, BTCino, Leviton and General Electric. Call 665-6954 for more information. KY's Electrical Supplies Limited of Southern Main Road, Canupia.
It's the talk of the town. It's Talk a Talk on U975FM Monday to Thursday from 6 to 9 p.m. So join me, your host Mukesh Baburam, on a 3-hour journey guaranteed to take your stress away. Remember, Monday to Thursday, right here on U975FM.
Gosh, boy, I can't wait to be woman.
Stuck in traffic again, Hare Babri.
Well, guess what? Your day is about to get hotter than ever in the afternoon. It's the new afternoon drive time program on U975 FM, Hot Like Pepper Multicultural Radio. Tune in Monday to Friday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. with yours truly, the DJ Flavia Experience. Let's make it hotter than ever in the afternoon. Great music, great info, and great vibes. Hotter than ever in the afternoon. Monday to Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. on U975 FM, Hot Like Pepper Multicultural Radio.
Well, it's just about 6 minutes here past the hour of 3 o'clock, and that time check came to you through the kind courtesy of Radio 975 FM, Hot Like Pepper. Yes, I am Kenrick Juggernaut, filling in for Nicole Duki this afternoon as we continue with our pre-budget discussion. Sharing the studio with me this afternoon is a former planning minister, Dr. Bo Tiwari, and also economist and former banker Ved Sriram, two people who are well known in the industry, two people who would have made their mark in Trinidad and Tobago as they discuss the issues of the day, more so as it pertains to the 2020 budget. Note that this package will be presented to the country on the 5th of October, and much expectations rather is being noted, especially by those in this sector. Well, let's get straight into our discussion here this afternoon. Note that I'll also be opening the lines for you where you can share a thought, share in the conversation, but to do so you need to call us at 636-7547 and 227-5739. Let me say a very special good afternoon to Dr. Bo Tiwari and former banker and economist Ved Sriram. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good afternoon, Ken. Good afternoon, listeners.
Well, certainly the 2020 budget, 2021 budget. 2021. Yeah, my apologies. Have it there. 2021 budget. It's certainly a headache for Finance Minister Colm Imbert. Most people in the know, gentlemen, are saying that this could continue with the trend, a deficit budget. What is expected? Talk on the ground is that maybe the minister may increase the taxes, may widen the net, and also there's this consideration of whether he will dip into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. Let's start with you first, Ved. The 2021 budget, your thoughts, what are your expectations?
Yeah, my expectations are very, very clear, that whilst they might be projecting a deficit of around $15 billion. Traditionally, that has been understated because the mechanics of calculating the deficit for the purposes of presenting in Parliament is that deficit figure is shown before capital repayment and before sinking fund contribution. My research sinking fund contribution is between $750 and $1 billion. So let's add on $1 billion to that. And the actual debt service, it would be at least 5 or 6, say 6 billion. So 6 plus 1. So if you are projecting a deficit of $15 billion, they should add on about $7 billion to that as well. So we are looking at $22 billion deficit. However, for the next year, it assumes a certain amount of revenue flow. The problem with the structure of our economy, the basic revenues for the country and for government comes from the oil sector, which declined over the years from over 34 billion in taxes down to less than 4 billion or 5 billion. So that's a dramatic drop. The rest of the country, we do not have a real economy outside the oil and gas sector. we are saying that the manufacturing sector and so on, as figures will show, they depend on subsidies from government. So when government holds back the subsidies and when government holds back the expenditure, the rest of the economy suffers significantly. And therefore the tax base from the non-energy sector also collapses. So in my estimate, for next year, government will not get more than $25 billion.
But that leaves a very wide gap, and I want to get Dr. Tiwari into the conversation here on his initial thoughts. Budget 2021, Dr. Tiwari. Expectations, widening of the tax net expectations, new taxes coming or increase in taxes. Your thoughts?
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to concede that this is a very, very tough place for the Minister of Finance to be. And that would be the case whoever was the Minister of Finance. It's a very tough situation to be in, given what has happened, what the impact of COVID has been on business and on the economy and on consumer demand and on loss of jobs. And it's a tough place to be given where we are in terms of expenditure, in terms of revenue, in terms of continuing deficits, and given the fact that whatever your situation, you have to govern and you have to finance many of the things by which you effect government. So I want to concede that it's a tough situation for him. But I think a lot has to do with the way you look at things, you know. The Minister of Finance or the government could either take a state of society perspective and moving to look at what is in your control and what is not in your control. And you look at the state of the society and you say, well, how do we intervene in order to make things reasonable, if not better, given the state of society? Or you can take an inward look at exactly those things that Ved and I mentioned just now, which are your expenditure, your revenue, your deficits, the business of government and how much you allocate for what, etc. And you look at it in terms of how you manage the money. The second one would be taking a kind of operational approach to the budget. And the first one, where you are looking outward at what is happening to the society, would be a more developmental approach. And I would suggest that while you cannot ignore the mechanics of operations and the reality that you have to deal with, you have to take a developmental approach in our time to this kind of budget. Because what you are looking at here with the effect of COVID is a situation in which businesses were asked to close. And they had to close their doors. Everybody had to go home. And basically the economy was put in standstill mode. Since then, some businesses have been able to open, some have still not been able to open, including many of the service businesses like bars and restaurants and things like that. And what it means is that the unemployment rate remains high, the function of business remains limited, and even those businesses that are functional, fully functional, have a problem of demand and a problem within the economy in which they are operating without the full business activity of a normal economic society, a normal economy. And I think it is important to take that point of view, because if you take that point of view, you would realize that the first thing that you've got to address is really how to get the economy more buoyant than it actually is now. Because if you didn't get the economy more buoyant than it actually is now, you wouldn't get people to go back to jobs, you wouldn't get businesses to be functioning at a more reasonable rate, and so on. So that has to be the number one issue. Whatever you decide on expenditure, on revenue, on operations, whatever you decide in terms of the deficit, all of these things have to be guided by the fact that you really have to restore the economy.
All right.
And therefore, I would say that if the minister has that in his head, first and foremost, then all the other things, I think, will fall into place to the extent that what you are really beginning to address is how you get the economy to a higher level of functionality again.
Dr. Tiwari, you spoke about the economy and making the economy buoyant and creating an avenue to kickstart the economy and so on. But I would have spoken to a number of people on the morning program, stakeholders in the industry, and they are very concerned, and I'll also pose this question to Ved in a little while. They are very concerned about the framework in the sense of the ease of doing business in the country.
Yes.
Too much protocol, too much red tape. And in order to soften this approach, to get people back into business, you need to address this, the ease of doing business in the country.
Agree.
Let me get your take, then Ved's
Well,
take.
first of all, I want to say that I agree with the business community, and I think they are in unison on this issue, because we are uncompetitive in terms of ease of doing business. I think we've fallen several points down to about 105. And although taxes have become a point of discussion by the Minister of Finance, and because of fear of the population, that is how the government is going to seek to generate revenue. In terms of the ability to pay your taxes, Trinidad and Tobago is almost last on the list, 174 or something like that. So the ease of paying taxes is a problem in Trinidad and Tobago. And that should be the thing that would be easiest if revenue is a high priority for you. So given all the other issues with ease of doing business, I think there was a time when they did a kind of one-stop shop for that. There were certain things that had to be done electronically between the Ministry of Planning and Ministry of Industry. I think that has to be made a priority so that you put a lot of emphasis on the private sector's ability to invest and get things done and make their businesses efficient and effective.
Ved, your take on this as a former banker, I mean, when you served in that particular industry, I'm sure that there are a number of business people who were bent on, let's say, getting, construction going and so on. And I'm here looking at the sort of challenges facing the town and country planning division, where people are having problems in getting their plans and documentation approval and so on. What are some of the measures that you would advise the Minister of Finance in order to remove this, let's say, a hurdle, the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago? Some of the policies, some of the hurdles, some of the setbacks. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the major mistakes that we are making is that we are becoming a first world nation, and therefore we ought to have laws and so on that reflect a first world nation. And I'll give you one example. Many countries in the world, and if you go to India, Bangladesh, and so on, the laws are there. You cannot have more than two in a vehicle, in one of the tuk-tuks or a taxi. You can't have more than four. You can't have people on top of the trains. The laws are there, but I'm saying that we have to be very careful about where do we see Trinidad and Tobago economy going. And if we want to pretend that we are first world and call everyone to task if they break the law, then the whole economy is going to come to a grinding halt. One of the reasons, another reason why people are disobeying the requirements by the town and country is that you take so long to get approvals, that you can actually die in the process. You're looking at justice in the courts, it takes so long. One of my clients passed away. So it means to say that our systems are just not working. And we have to definitely look at the simple things. And the question of town and country approval is extremely important to get the construction sector working, to get land development working. That has to be a priority for the government today. And there ought to be systems in place, that timelines, that once you submit, within a certain timeline, certain things to be done. So within 3 to 4 months, approvals ought to be had. Otherwise, the potential investor lose interest in it, and it just lingers on.
But having said that, Ved and Dr. Tiwari, would note that the Prime Minister on the political campaign trail would have said that the construction sector, and by extension to the agriculture sector, are two of the main areas where the government of the day will be looking at to generate income, for so to speak. But here it is, you have this problem facing a number of contractors who have, let's say, document to be passed by town and country planning. And in essence, that is a hurdle and that is a challenge. And I am saying that ought to be addressed. Dr. Tiwari?
Yeah, well, if I do agree that agriculture as a priority is very important, and that you should spend a lot of time, energy, effort, strategy, organization, building that up, because it is so valuable in terms of the production side, putting food on the table, reducing the import bill, creating the capacity to link with manufacturing, production, agro-processors here, and also even creating the conditions for export of fresh goods. So I think that should be a priority. And if that is a priority, then all the things that stand in the way of the production process, the land tenure issues, bridal larceny issues, the access roads issue, the water and irrigation issue, the guaranteed prices issue, getting things to market and making sure that when you finish, you don't end up with a lot of things that rot and so on. So in other words, making that market organized and efficient. All those things, you have to basically itemize them, sequence them, figure out how it's going to be done, and organize for it. The second thing, and that is how you're going to deal with some of the big issues like foreign exchange savings and import reduction and those kinds of things, right? Plus creating the conditions in which food is abundant and relatively cheap, and the farmer still is able to make a profit. Now, the other thing, which is housing construction, this is very important, and I really think that housing construction is a way of creating jobs, and we have a need of about 140,000 houses in the country, and a lot of these are requirements for low-cost housing. So that I believe that housing construction could be something that we support. But I think if you are going to restructure the economy, and if you are going to move the economy away from energy, and if you are going to move the economy to become greener and more sustainable, then the practices that you have for agriculture and the development of agriculture and the practices that you have for housing also have to be much more sustainable and greener. So for housing, we can introduce the element, especially in government housing, whether being built by the state or by the private contractor, because you can have public-private partnerships, or you can give the private sector the land and ask them to build, and then you make arrangements for the people to buy, etc. Whether it is public or private, whether it is driven by the state or by the private sector or both, you can ask for at least three things. One is greener practices and the utilization of material in the construction of the housing. Secondly, solar lighting and solar energy, where you have the need for energy, that you have the need for lights. And secondly, rainwater harvesting, because we have a problem of water in this country. And if you have a situation in which rainwater harvesting becomes part of the development of communities, I think that is a partial solution all over the country to one of the problems that we have here.
All right, let me bring in Ved into the equation here. Ved, creating a buoyant economy, and Dr. Tiwari would have spoken this a while ago about infrastructure, more so for the agricultural sector. What about, you would have served in government, Dr. Tiwari, and you would have been in industry for the longest while, Ved. Creating the framework, creating the necessary or introducing the necessary initiative to encourage young budding business people to get involved in construction, the initiative, the mechanisms, and what have you.
Yeah, with regards to the construction industry, I think whatever resources we have and whatever we want to incentivize, it must be devoted to a few things, specific industries. One is agriculture, one is agro-processing, the third is recycling. The fourth, we need local places of interest for local tourism. We need green energy. So construction should not just be building a road to Toko. All those things should stop. Without a feasibility study and without some kind of return coming from those investments, you remember government is in a position where they cannot even fulfill their recurrent expenditure. So they ought not to be borrowing money to put into investments that wouldn't bring back immediate funding. You cannot say, let us invest in airport in Tobago and down the road. There's no down the road for us. Everything has to be immediate. Whatever we need now, we are in crisis. When you're in crisis and your house is on fire, you don't engage a builder to expand the room. You have to douse the fire, and that is our immediate requirement. How do we douse the fire and still produce enough food for us to live? And with regards to shelter, housing programs are good. Government has a tremendous amount of land, so there could be public-private partnership, but not what they have been doing before. For example, $1 million home, $2 million home, and somewhere West Mooring. That is not required. UNC had a Susu land program, and that is what we have to go back to. We have to realize Trinidad is a poor country. It's a poor country living out of high hopes because we have inherited those hopes, but things have to change dramatically now.
Therefore, Ved and Dr. Tiwari, you would agree that the challenge for the Minister of Finance is not the size of the expenditure. Rather, it comes from, but how or what it is spent on. You'd agree with me?
Well, both do.
Yeah.
We, based on the last budget, we had an expenditure of about $53 billion. And I would think that the government cannot afford to spend at that same level now. I think that given the revenue, which is at about $35 billion, and given that automatic deficit with whatever your expenditure is, I think that you have to make up your mind to make a cut in expenditure. Now, I don't think that the cut needs to be to $35 billion to meet the revenue expectations, okay? Because if you did that, the impact on lives in the society and on those who are dependent on resources of the state would be too severe. And you would really have a situation in which people would be at their wits' end in order to survive. But I think that you could take it down from $53 billion. And the question would be, what would you cut? And my own feeling is that there are two things that are going on. One is that there was an IDB initiative, an initiative backed by the IDB some time ago, to look at all the social welfare expenditures and to look at the issue of duplication and wastage and inappropriate allocation, and to clean up that list so that you actually targeted the people who were genuinely in need. So I would say that we should try and see where that particular initiative is. If it has been completed, then we have a roadmap in order to deal with that. And there are certain people who are not in a situation where they can not help themselves or will never be able to help themselves, who can be taken off the list. And the second place that, and if they are not finished with the exercise, I would give those who are conducting the exercise no more than 1 year to complete it. And I may carry it this year, but I would make sure that once that cleanup exercise is done, I then operate according to the cleanup list. The second thing that I would do is that I really think that there should be a cut in the state enterprise, what can I say, subventions, the subventions to the state enterprise. If the government made a decision to cut 10%, I think that it would force those institutions to be much more effective, much more efficient, to cut out waste, to cut out needless expenditure, and to get their business in order. And I think it would be a gain for the public purse, and a gain in terms of efficiency and effectiveness and productivity in those state enterprises. I don't think that 10% is an onerous amount to cut by. If it were 15% or 20%, it would cause a lot of problems. People would probably have to be sent home, etc. But I think with a 10% cut, given the normal wastage in companies, given excesses that are almost automatic, given the fact that you could make adjustments and cuts, these state enterprises could now be making adjustments. So I would suggest that you need to cut the expenditure, and you also need to be very clear where you're going to cut them to cause the least heavy fallout. All right? Perhaps not the easiest fallout, but the least heavy fallout. And at the same time, you've got to change the pattern of expenditure and how you allocate money, because you need the money in developmental works that will be productive and add value to the economy.
All right, let's bring Ved into the conversation here. Ved, Dr. Tiwari is talking about a cut in the state enterprises, 10%. But before we look at cuts, don't you think it would be more appropriate and a better fiscal sense to look at widening the net? Because I said this morning on the program that there are a number of people outside there, business people, small business people, medium-sized business people, owe billions of dollars in taxes to the government of the day. Don't you think it would be more appropriate at this time, rather than look at cuts, to widen the tax net, so to speak?
Yeah, if you want to take blood from stone, you can try it. But I think the population has reached a crisis stage financially that they are just unable to pay. They're just unable to pay. And what are you going to do in those circumstances? And those who have the wherewithal, they'll hire the best accountants and best legal mind to duck and bob and weave and evade taxes, and that has been going on for years. I think our whole taxation system has to be revamped and simplified, And many countries have done it. Antigua has just gotten rid of PAYE. The cost of administration is so high, you get rid of it. Every country will have, and a country economics don't stay static, so you can design what is the best taxation system for Trinidad at this current time. And I will tell you what it is. Apart from the oil sector, which you can proceed with, apart from the corporate taxes, which you can leave in place, but get rid of this PAY. There's a tremendous amount of effort to collect, and I think the cost of collection might be higher than what you actually collect. When you get rid of PAYE, your employer don't have to pay you the tax, and you don't have to pay into the government the tax, and therefore the cost of doing business automatically declines. Where does government pick up the tax? The government can pick up 99, or I would say, let's look at the facts. It is less than 1% agriculture contribute to GDP. There are concerns with GDP measurement and so on, but let's go with the published figures. Less than 1%. So it means to say 99% we depending on imports. Where does imports come in? Through the seaport and the airport. Collect your taxes there and get rid of all the machinery that you have collecting taxes. When is the best time to catch a chicken? When it's in the pen, when it's in the coop. That is where you collect your taxes. And then of course government has other source of revenues which they have squandered over the years. The other sources of revenues, government has a tremendous amount of investment that they have squandered. Dividends from NGC has disappeared. They used to get $15 billion a year. Now it's probably down to zero. In fact, NGC said they're short of cash. So government has investments that if they were managing properly, they would have gotten dividends as well. But they've wasted all of that, and now you're coming to the citizens who depend on government expenditure to make their bread and butter, and you are asking to tax them. It doesn't make sense. The taxation is gone. So it's better you have a consumption tax and collect it by way of by way of duties at the port.
Dr. Tiwari, there are many ways in which the finance minister can raise money, so to speak, of course, to run the affairs of the country. One is an increase in taxation, new taxation, or three, dip into heritage and stabilization fund. Let me get your thoughts on that, Dr. Tiwari.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think the first thing that he should try to do is to cut expenditure in the way that I suggest. I think by rationalizing the social welfare grant system and being very humane about it, but being very clinical about the way you make those eliminations, and making, of course, a clear distinction between COVID era support, which were given in terms of grants, and grants that people need because they cannot do better. They have to get those grants in order to live, in order to survive. And the second thing, as I said, is the allocation to state enterprises, which I think we could do with a 10% cut. And the third thing I think that they can do to save is that I think that for at least the next year, they can eliminate the allocations for all foreign travel. There is no traveling now anyway, and I don't think 1 year is going to kill anybody. I don't know what that amount is. I didn't take the time to sit down and look at what might be the possible, when you add them up, what is likely to be. And the second thing I think that you can look at this time, given the situation with educational organizations, given what is happening with online systems and so on, I think they can also eliminate for 1 year the training budget. Not that training is not important. You need to be constantly learning in order to be on the job and pick up new skills and to learn new things. But I think for this year, they can suppress the allocation for training and they can support the allocation for foreign travel. Now, allocation for training goes against my grain because I'm an educator by nature. And I really feel that people need to be constantly learning. But I think for 1 year, we could suppress that because we need to make some cuts. After we make the cuts, the question is, where do you get revenue from? I do not think you can tax citizens anymore. And in fact, I think that's a real problem for individual tax, working for tax of employed people. I think that they already have the bank tax at 35%, which is extremely high. Corporation tax is 30%, which again is extremely high and onerous. And my own feeling, given that the small business sector is about 17,000 businesses pre-COVID, and given that many of them have shut down because they cannot survive after the closure that came with COVID, and given that the fact that they are under severe pressure, I would call, I mean, they could hardly pay their tax now. What I would suggest is that we reduce the tax for small and medium enterprises. I would reduce it to about 20%. It's not going to cost the government that much, from 30 to 20 for those small businesses, which were low taxpayers anyway. But I would widen the tax net for businesses. I think the government is in a better position to determine who wasn't paying NIS and who must now pay NIS, and who wasn't filing taxes and who must now file because people would have put forward their information and so on. And I think on that basis, in a non-punitive way, taking the information that is available, they can widen the tax net, and that will be of value going forward. The government wants to introduce the property tax now, but I would hold on that. Not that I would hold on property tax forever, because we did not have land and building taxes from 2009, and revenue was foregone there, and we haven't had any kind of tax since. I think it is reasonable for people to pay property tax, but I don't think in this climate, in this situation, in which people don't have jobs, their businesses are collapsing, they could hardly make ends meet, I don't think you want to add property tax to their personal and corporate burden.
All right.
And I would hold on that for a little bit.
Okay, Dr. Tiwari, let's pause there for a while, because that would have been my other discussion with you and Ved this afternoon. Property tax and the Revenue Authority is something you can think about, Ved, but when I come back, we'll discuss that. Stay with us here. 975 FM, Hot Like Pepper. Let's go to some commercials this afternoon.
It's the talk of the town. It's Talk It Up on U975 FM, Monday to Thursday from 6 to 9 p.m. So join me, your host, Mukesh Baburam, on a 3-hour journey guaranteed to take your stress away. Remember, Monday to Thursday, right here on U975 FM.
KY's Electrical Supplies Limited of Southern Main Road, Canupia, for all your plumbing and electrical supplies, water heaters, filters and water pumps, plus all parts for Gould, Pentax and Leo pumps. Choose from leading brands such as Cooper, Varma, BTCino, Leviton and General Electric. Call 665-6954 for more information. KY's Electrical Supplies Limited of Southern Main Road, Canupia.
It's the talk of the town. It's Talk It Up on U975 FM, Monday to Thursday from 6 to 9 p.m. So join me, your host, Mukesh Baburam, on a 3-hour journey guaranteed to take your stress away. Remember, Monday to Thursday, right here on U975 FM.
A&S Hardware and the General Contractors Limited of 107 Bonaventure Road in Gasparillo for all your hardware materials from foundation to finish. Not forgetting all your general contracting needs. We have it all at A&S Hardware and the General Contractors Limited, located at 107 Bonaventure Road in Gasparillo. Just call Tiki Ali at 650-2180.
A&S Hardware are wholesalers and retailers of plywood, an assortment of lumber, galvanized pipe, hollow section and steel. Customers can enjoy special prices on white pine and pitch pine doors.
Kathy's Cool Spot Enterprises Limited, number 86 Pearville, opposite the TSTT Exchange in Mayaro. We specialize in all types of meats, dry goods, liqueur, beverages, ice, LPG, gas, motor oils, stationery supplies, and photocopying. We also provide rentals of tents and chairs for your every occasion. Come in and take advantage of our specials at reduced prices on liqueur, wholesale and retail. We are open every day, even on public holidays, for your convenience. TT Post services are available here at Kathy's Cool Spot Enterprises Limited of number 86 Pearville, Mayaro, where our friendly staff will be happy to serve you.
Yes, indeed, and welcome back to our pre-budget discussion.
I'll get back to you. Okay.
Yeah, with former government minister Dr. Tiwari and economist and banker Ved Siram. A very healthy discussion indeed in the first part of our program this afternoon. So let's continue with our discussion as we look at budget 2021. Ved, before we went to the break, Dr. Tiwari was talking about property tax, and I want to bring into the equation now here this measure of the revenue authority. Those two areas.
Yeah, I did some research. I was asked to make a presentation on that particular subject along with other speakers, and it was inconclusive that it will make any incremental difference, and we may end up increasing the size of government. Then you have to ask the major problem was that the Minister of Finance would have been in charge of appointing the head of that department or that institution, and I personally felt that was unnecessary, and at the moment we are hoping that it will bring about some changes, and my feeling and the evidence I saw, it was not conclusive at all. In fact, it was costing the country more than the benefit that they received. And that's why I'm saying what is more important, restructure our taxation, that it becomes simple, and every time be focus on consumption tax. So every time you buy something, you make a payment to government, and that's a far more easier way. What it will do, it will free up a lot of people in the Ministry of Finance to go and plant tomatoes, to go and plant corn, to go and mine cows, to go and mine sheep, and that is where the direction has to be in terms of job creation. And it does not have to be such a tedious task, because with technology now a lot of things could become simple. I did visit a dairy farm in New England many years ago, and one person in the morning, an educated person by the way, girl, she was milking 150 cows in the morning, she alone. So the use of technology, and this is where our whole educational system must fit in to see where are we taking this country, where do we expect to restructure the economy, because everyone is talking about restructuring the economy, but we are not saying what do we expect Trinidad and Tobago to become in the next 5 years. No one has defined that. They're talking about IT, they're talking about tourism, and those things are not going to happen. Even if IT becomes perhaps a leg to stand on, it's not going to employ so many people. And where are we competitively, where are we in the world today in terms of IT?
All right, Dr. Tiwari, you would have sat in government at one time, and I remember some of your debates. I listened to some of your debates as it relates to the introduction of the property tax. You have also indicated this afternoon that you are against the introduction of the property tax. But as we stay on that subject, what about your revenue authority? You would have a signal red flag over the revenue authority.
Yeah,
yes?
when I spoke on that matter during the debate, I was opposed to the revenue authority, because I think that what you are going to do is to create another governmental apparatus and bureaucracy at relatively high cost with capacity for political interference rather than gain any efficiency. There's no reason why the Inland Revenue cannot be efficient, and while the tax net cannot be expanded, and why you could not have a simple taxation system in which there is a high level of conformity, which would increase the amount of revenue available for government. When the recommendations were made as to how to improve the tax collection system, because that is what it is about, how to increase your tax net and how to improve your revenue, there were 4 recommendations, of which the Revenue Authority was only one. And I think the government chose that because they felt that they could get rid of people, change the terms of employment, and also create, manufacture a creature that they were better able to control. And therefore I think the motivation was wrong. And I don't think that making the expenditure at this time for a revenue authority is worth the amount of money you can get without going in that direction.
But the revenue authority, according to the argument of this administration, is in the main vid to bring all those delinquent business people, individuals into the loop, to ensure that they pay the taxes, to ensure that they pay what is due to the people of Trinidad and
You
Tobago.
don't need a revenue authority for that. You could do it now if you wanted to. And there are different ways of doing it. You could be coercive, which I don't think will work, or you can be developmental and inclusive and create the conditions for increased participation, and I think it can work. But I really, Ved was supposed to...
No, absolutely. That would have been my answer, because what is preventing them from doing it now? But they raise some further issues. If you are so inefficient, then all the ministries are inefficient, and precisely you're admitting it. You're admitting it, that you can't collect the taxes. First of all, if you're saying is the taxation system so complex, what prevents you from changing it, making it simpler? So you are admitting that you are inefficient, and therefore, why would we accept your recommendations to get into something that may be equally inefficient or more inefficient?
Well, Dr. Tiwari also too spoke about the property tax, and opposition leader Kamla Prasad Bisasa would have said to not implement or not to move forward with this measure in this 2021 budget. Your take on the property tax?
Well, Ken, I don't know if you recall, obviously you would not have read all my articles, and at one point I called it a toilet tax, and I'll tell you why. You must have heard that before.
Yes.
Because when the minister kept answering questions, he said, no, if the house has an outhouse, the maximum you'll charge is $400. So I said, you are asking now people with maybe 3 and 4 toilets in their home to decommission it and build an outhouse. So I thought it was very funny, because there's no way you can justify a property tax. Now, if you want to justify a tax for collecting garbage and so on, that's fine, but not a property tax. There are too many problems with it, and I'll tell you some of the problems. If, for example, a farmer has planted trees on his land, he's not getting in revenues on those trees, but the property value keeps going up and he's required to pay. Where does he get the revenue to pay? And 1 year before harvest, somebody come and steals out, and they do it quite often, quite bold-faced. They come and steal your timber. So what do you do then? You're given money to government for what purpose? Secondly, let's look at another example. If a person inherited a house between the commercial buildings in Port of Spain, and you have generational families living in that house, the value of that property is very, very high. So they are living on their pension, and they are now asked to pay a property based on the rental value of that property. You know, those we still have those houses, ancient houses between those properties. So what are you telling these people? Are you affecting their constitutional right? They are telling them to please leave. You're too poor. You're too poor to live in a house inherited from your forefathers.
All right, gentlemen, let's leave the discussion there for a while. I have to prepare for the 4 o'clock newscast.
Yes.
And when we come back, we'll continue with our pre-budget discussion. In the studio with me this afternoon, Dr. Bo Tiwari, and of course, Ved Sriram, two well-known individuals in the fraternity. Stay with us here at 975 FM Hot Like Pepper. Let me keep you a bit entertained this afternoon as I prepare for the 4 o'clock newscast. Stay with us here at 975 FM Hot Like Pepper.
A millionaire or some kind of petty bourgeoisie anytime you live in here. In this country, you got to be in skullduggery, making you money illicitly to live like somebody. In this country, it's outrageous and insane, them crazy prices in Port of Spain, and like the merchants going out their brain, and the working man like the only toiling in vain. Where you ever hear a television for 7,000, $250,000 for in piece of land? A pair of sneakers, $200, 80,000-90,000 for motor cars. At last, here in Trinidad, we see capitalism gone mad. It's sad and getting more bad because doo-doo capitalism gone mad. Provide for your family today on your present salary is an impossibility in this country. So many bills to pay, there is no conceivable way to save for a rainy day. In this country, avariciousness, to be precise, is why every damn thing so overpriced. Big business making everybody feel government give them a open license to steal. Would you believe me? One nylon panty is $19.90, $20 for some baby milk. The cheapest jersey costs over $60, $200 and change a yard for silk. It's hard here in Trinidad. Lord have mercy, capitalism gone mad. It's sad, things getting more bad. Oh Lord, capitalism gone mad.
This is Arabian Vibes.
To buy a pack of cigarette, just leave you with a hole in your wallet, and money is so hard to get. In this country, necessity or luxuries, it doesn't matter what the item is, they're charging anything they please. In this country, primary school books price is lewd, is highway robbery, the price of food. All hopes and dreams elude the poor man, but politicians still expect good work attitude. Just imagine this, the cheapest coffee, over 3,000, not even dying today easy. Thousands of dollars for the undertakers, so you could get a spot in the cemetery. It hard here in Trinidad. Oh Lord, capitalism gone mad. The gladness that once we had is gone because capitalism gone mad. You got to have heavy contact, know how to move up in society to make any kind of impact in this country. You got to know how to chip the feel, how to scheme and swindle properly, perfect the art of wheel and deal in this country. I say survival in this land isn't easy for no man. With unemployment and high inflation, somehow we go dead before the end of this recession. Where the hell is this? Some mango Julie costing $3.50, $40 for one watermelon. Half your salary for fish, meat and poultry. Time you buy greens, all your money done. It's hard here in Trinidad. Lord have mercy, capitalism.
Time has come. U975. Make it your choice. Something for everyone. 975 FM. Music for you. It's all about you.
U975 FM, hot like pepper, multicultural radio.
Power to the listeners.
It is now time for major news to the hour. It comes to you with the very kind compliments of Super Quality Supermarket, Sheikh Lisha Limited, the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday, and Darpan Trading Company Limited.
And a very good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to our newscast at this time on 975 FM, a hot like pepper, multicultural radio. This newscast is being powered to you by RCL Communications Network. I am Kenwood Juggernaut. Good afternoon. In our top story at this time, testing backlog for the coronavirus have been cleared up. This according to the Minister of Health, Terence Dialsing, as he spoke at this morning's update. He acknowledged that what is currently being done by the authorities is clearing up of reports.
Testing backlog has been cleared up. What we are now clearing up is the reporting backlog. So we do have some reports to go out to persons via the offices of the county medical officers of health. So there are still some reports to go out, which we have identified from day one, and we are hoping to have all of that cleared off very soon.
The voice there of the Health Minister, Terence Dialsing. The Ministry of Health said there are currently 2,963 known active cases of COVID-19 in the country. According to the ministry's update, 29 more people tested positive for the virus and will be processed for admission at the discretion of the Chief Medical Officer. The ministry said in a revised update that the death toll stands at 65. The ministry said to date 29,183 samples had been submitted for testing, with 26,120 unique tests and 3,963 repeated tests. The total number of known positive cases now stands at 3,930. Meantime, speaking at this morning's update, Dr. Michelle Trotman called on nationals who are on home quarantine to continue to observe the necessary health protocols.
That COVID-19, unfortunately, will be with us for a while. We are asking at Cora and at all of the other institutions and nationally. And we try to get our staff to build that in while you're there. We try to get our staff to make a change in the person that's there, so that by the time you come in to the time you leave, we've made some sort of impression, amongst which we want to ensure that we emphasize that in COVID-19 now and for the very near and distant future, we need to do some basic things. Last life. We need to get and all know and live the new normal.
The voice there of Dr. Michelle Trotman as she spoke at this morning's Ministry of Health update. Police were called to the scene of a fire in Tobago where a 59-year-old woman has died. The deceased has been identified as Lilga Allen Peters of Spring Garden Trace, Tobago. According to initial reports, at around 8 o'clock, fire officials received reports of a fire at a two-story home in the community. Appliances were dispatched and officers arrived on the scene shortly. When they arrived, they were rather informed of a man who had suffered burn injuries while attempting to rescue Peters, who had been trapped inside. Fire officers were able to contain the blaze before it spread to nearby structures. You're with news on 975 FM, Hot Like Pepper. Not much consultation would have been conducted with the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association. This as the government of the day undertook the measure to engage in virtual classes, which would have started last week. This is the view of President of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, Antonia De Freitas, as she spoke to 975 this morning. De Freitas argued that some of the challenges facing her membership today could have been avoided if the ministry would have engaged all stakeholders going forward. De Freitas said, however, that discussions are ongoing with the ministry to address the many concerns of teachers in preparation for the opening of school in January.
Tutor, however, has been engaging the ministry and the minister, looking at the concerns of teachers and making recommendations. Moving forward, as we work towards the opening of school in January, possibility.
The voice there of a president of Tutor, Antonia De Freitas, as she spoke exclusively to 975. The Tobago House of Assembly has submitted a $4.7 billion estimate for the fiscal year 2021. Deputy Chief Secretary of Finance and Economy, Joel Jack, reminded the public about the request during the THA Post-Executive Council media briefing.
Anticipate that the Tobago House of Assembly will be given the necessary support to ensure that Tobago's development, that the pace of the island's development continues unabated. We have always said, and it is a view as well of this central government, that Tobago has a critical role to play in national economic.
That COVID-19.
That's the voice there of Secretary of Finance, Joel Jack. Regionally, Jamaica have gone on high alert. This following what law enforcement authorities have termed coordinated attacks against police officers and their families. The Jamaica Constabulary Force in a statement said that it had raised the threat level for violence against members to high and that there have been 3 such incidents in the past 24 hours. The JCF said that 3 men have been taken into custody in connection with the incidents. The JFC added it is unable to disclose details due to the sensitive nature of the high-level investigation with the National Security Minister. Those are but some of the stories that are trending to the hour right here on 975 FM Hot Like Pepper. Let's take a look at what's happening in today's weather forecast. Well, for the greater part of today, Trinidad and Tobago will be predominantly fair. There's the chance of a mild to moderate shower in various localities. Seas are normal, waves up to 1.5 to 2 meters in open waters, near calm in sheltered areas. The maximum temperature for today stays at 34 degrees Celsius, the minimum at 24. And sunset, it's at 6:04. That's your weather forecast and news at this time on 975. I am Ken McJuggernaut. Good afternoon.
That was Major News to the Hour, brought to you with the very kind compliments of Super Quality Supermarket, Sheikh Lisha Limited, the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday, and Darban Trading Company Limited. A&S Hardware and the General Contractors Limited of 107 Bonaventure Road in Gasparillo. For all your hardware materials from foundation to finish. Not forgetting all your general contracting needs. We have it all at A&S Hardware and General Contractors Limited, located at 107 Bonaventure Road in Gasparillo. Just call Tiki Ali at 650-2180.
A&S Hardware are wholesalers and retailers of plywood, an assortment of lumber, galvanized pipe, hollow section, and steel. Customers can enjoy special prices on white pine and pitch pine doors.
We shopping at Durban Supermarkets. Hey, come down. We value at Durban Supermarket. Shop now at Durban Supermarket. Come to Durban Supermarket. We got the best prices for your pockets. Get real value for your money. Durban Supermarket treats you like family. Nothing overpriced, it's guaranteed for sure. Save big at Durban and shop even more. Real value to Durban Supermarket. We got the best prices for your pockets. Take advantage of unbelievable deals at Durban Supermarket, number 28 Foster Road in Sangre Grande. Durban Supermarket and Investment Limited, giving you real value for your money.
Kathy's Cool Spot Enterprises Limited, number 86 Pearville, opposite the TSTT Exchange in Mayaro. We specialize in all types of meats, dry goods, liqueur, beverages, ice, LPG, gas, motor oils, stationery supplies, and photocopying. We also provide rentals of tents and chairs for your every occasion. Come in and take advantage of our specials at reduced prices on liqueur, wholesale and retail. We are open every day, even on public holidays, for your convenience. TT Post services are available here at Kathy's Cool Spot Enterprises Limited of number 86 Pearville, Mayaro, where our friendly staff will be happy to serve you.
Attention all bakers, doubles vendors and roti makers. Try our high quality unbleached bromate free all-purpose and baker's flour. Low price and conveniently packaged in 2 pounds, 2 kg, 10 kg and 25 kg bags. For wholesale and retail prices, contact Shiklisha Limited 665-3336 or visit us at Warrenville, Canupia. Shiklisha Limited, quality you can trust.
Can't go anywhere to enjoy yourself? Well, join us on 97.5 FM, Hot Like Pepper, Multicultural Radio, as we got your Saturdays covered. The party starts from 8 a.m. Yes, 8 a.m. to 12 noon. We got Sharon Baruch alongside DJ Vishal. 12 to 3 p.m. Captain Kendall is in full flight and will take you straight into 3 to 6 as DJ Anil will put you into the mix. Then from 6 to 9, the man DJ Sean, half man, half amazing, takes the spotlight from 6 to 9. And from 9 to 1, the man Corky D steps into the building and he will mix it up for you into the morning. Tune in, log on 975radio.com as we put you into party mood with all of our DJs and announcers. Tell your friends, tell your family, 975radio.com.
U975 Hot Like Pepper Multicultural Radio is now on Facebook. Like us, follow and share our page. We'll be sharing the latest news, tips and much more. You can also view what's happening in our studio. Find us on YouTube and subscribe to our channel at RCL U975.
Yes, indeed, and welcome back to our pre-budget discussion. In the studio with me this afternoon, Dr. Bo Tiwari, former government minister, and Ved Sriram, banker and economist, as we look at budget 2021. Well, in the first hour of our program this afternoon, we would have touched on a number of areas. But I want to pose this question to Dr. Tiwari this afternoon. Dr. Tiwari, our economy centered around energy, oil and gas, and for the longest while governments come and governments go. We talk about diversification. What's the humbug in diversification?
Well, I think the humbug before was that we were too comfortable being an energy producing country in which the revenues were almost automatic. and we never really took the steps to diversify in a deep way that would restructure the economy and create options away from energy. Now, there is some diversification that did take place. I mean, you had the Point Lisa's estate, which basically moved the country from oil to gas-based, what can I say, gas-based, and also fueled by other derivatives from gas, and in which an entire estate and a port and so on was built. You also, I think over the years, the financial sector has evolved and become, what can I say, I mean, comparatively reasonably sophisticated and buoyant. And we did develop a manufacturing sector which contributes about 8% to the GDP. And services have also been growing. But the real problem is this, which is that all those sectors that I mentioned together, except the manufacturing sector that is linked to energy, do not provide foreign exchange in sufficient quantity to allow the country to function. The country uses about $1.6 billion in foreign exchange a year. That has been reduced now because there has been suppression of expenditure, there's been suppression of foreign exchange, etc., but that has been reduced. And we really need to do now the restructuring and diversification that can make a difference into the future. Now, I think that there are some options in energy, but I won't get into that now. I think what we need to do is to build on what we have outside of the energy sector. For instance, in non-energy manufacturing, we've got to get some of those companies to export more. Some of them are already exporting, and to conquer new markets and to expand and develop. Where they do not have 3 shifts, we should try and expand their markets to the point where they have basically a 24-hour operation, and we can do that with those that exist. I think we can build an export capacity in services. Uruguay is a country that has done that, and perhaps we cannot do it as successfully now as they did then, but I think that there are options there. And if we got to the point where we could in fact have a digital Internet of Things based economy, we could in fact build things on that, including the value chain for things like fourth industrial revolution businesses and things driven by artificial intelligence. But having said all of that, we cannot ignore the basic fact that the economy is, first of all, in basic form, land, labor, and capital. And I think we can really use the land for agricultural productive purposes. I think we can strengthen the manufacturing sector by building more agro-processing and manufacturing capability built on indigenous production. And I also think that we can export, and as we are able to see tourism restored in the world, and that will only happen with a vaccine and the opening up of travel and stuff like that, I think we can also link that to things like tourism and so on. And I'm talking about region, I'm not talking about Trinidad and Tobago alone. So I think we need to recognize what we have, and I say what we have would be manufacture, services, and land for agriculture. Our agriculture is too weak. And we must understand export and connectivities, like with agriculture and agro-processing. And we also must understand how we can create pulls, like tourism, that would allow us to expand those markets. I think all of those things we can do. And I want to talk, I think it's important to mention moving up the value chain in the existing agriculture and also the services, moving to artificial intelligence and fourth industrial revolution type industries. And that's not so far-fetched. We have a small company here linked to research at the University of the West Indies that is doing a lot of export work in artificial intelligence. They're basically supplying other countries with that capacity right here on the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies. So it can be done. The other thing we must understand is that we have a massive number of graduates that have come out of the university system in the last 10 years. Many of them have been underemployed. Some of them are unemployed. And we continue to produce graduates. That should be seen as a talent pool on which you can base investments. The second thing is that we need to look and see what this disruption has meant in terms of companies that were heavily invested in production systems in China. And with the change in attitude in which people are basically looking at making their national economies as buoyant and self-sufficient as possible and creating connectivities in neighborhood economies, I think we should also look at opportunities that we might be able to tap from some of those American companies or Canadian companies that were heavily invested in China that might want to relocate. Now, having said that, I think we must recognize, though, that we are not talking about a normal economy. We are talking about a COVID-hit economy. And therefore, there is a limitation to what we can do now until a vaccine is found. So I think we need to have the consciousness of a pre-vaccine period of COVID and a post-vaccine period of COVID. And in the time that is pre-vaccine, in addition to preparing all of these things that we might want to prepare for when the world transforms and opens up, we might want to deal with some of the things that we should be dealing with here, like agricultural production, which can be done internally, like flood control, which can be done internally, like water capture, which can be done internally, like building access roads for agriculture, which can be done internally, like beautification, like retention ponds, like preparing tourism sites, dealing with all the tourism assets, etc. So when the time comes that we open up all this basic infrastructure, all this community enhancement, community involvement can be done. It will have already been done to take advantage of travel and tourism opportunities.
All right. My question to you, Ved, this afternoon is this. As a former banker, and Dr. Tiwari would have spoken about creating the necessary framework, the infrastructure, and the environment for businesses. But to do that, you have to look at the role now of the Banking Association of Trinidad and Tobago, something which you are quite familiar with. The role of the bankers, the role of the Bankers Association in this country, in terms of creating incentive, creating the right avenue, making it comfortable for people to want to do business. Your thoughts?
Well, I have some very strong views on that. The Bankers Association, they are creators of very unpleasant financial structures that has put many companies into receivership. We have lacked, the central bank has been very delinquent in not putting in laws that along with the government putting in laws to protect consumers. Just imagine in this day and age, we don't even have an act, Truth in Lending Act. That's such a basic act. For years, they've been using the add-on rate, which was illegal in Canada, and we have about 2 or 3 Canadian banks here, but they were practicing it very, very openly in Trinidad, your add-on rates. And it is unlawful in Canada as a result of some of the articles I wrote. They ultimately changed it, but then again, central bank never monitored it to such an extent where the add-on rate was actually not only discontinued officially, but in practice as well. So I don't know if they're still doing that. The banks just aim, their sole aim, there's no allocation to say going into angel investments or new investments or to support new ideas that are coming out. They do not allocate. In fact, they've been very reckless in terms of lending to what I would call name lending, that they've lost hundreds of millions of dollars on these transactions when they could have put aside some of that money for startup companies and be part of it. I don't know if you remember, we used to have a development company, finance company, and that has Trinidad,
is the DFC.
Yeah, we don't have it anymore. That the equivalent that was taken over by a private institution and run it as a private institution. There's nothing to finance development in Trinidad, and whilst of course there could be some funding and so on from the ministry, but by and large it's not, or the Ministry of the Agricultural Development Bank, but it is not being run in the interest of Trinidad and Tobago, because there's very few or little or no successes coming out of these institutions. So the bankers, they are in serious problem today. I don't know if you realize. Republic Bank profits declined by 37%. Scotiabank declined by 30%. FCB also declined by 30-some%. They have a huge non-performing loan portfolio. It's massive. What has delayed the recording of that is some forbearance by, I think, central bank, because by law, by accounting principles, if you don't receive your interest in 3 months, that loan should go into non-performing. But there has been some forbearance. So perhaps for the first 3 months after the COVID hit, they were able to shift those loans and not record it in a non-performing loan. But it's getting worse. It's getting worse. And I would hate to see the day when the banks, because they've been they have been very reckless in their lending practices. So I'd hate to see the day they turn to government and say, look, we want a bailout. Now that, in my view, is on the cards. It's on the cards. I did some work in the Eastern Caribbean, and quite frankly, the 2008 wiped out a lot of their balance sheet because they had a lot of their assets in New York. In the Caribbean, it's in Trinidad itself, the banks have a lot of their assets in foreign investments. So all those money should have been brought back, but I don't think our regulators know what to do or are aware of the situation. I was surprised when the Minister of Finance, I think last budget or budget before, allowed the insurance companies to up their external investments by 5% from 20 to 25%, I think. So all that money is being kept abroad. Republic Bank has invested significant amount of money abroad. In Barbados, you can't even get dividends payment from Barbados. They invested in West Africa as well. And those are currencies, when you invest in weak currencies and it weakens, you lose your investments. Soon as they invested in Suriname, the Suriname currency tanked and they lost money there as well. I think right now they're making some money in Guyana, and that's about it. But a lot of that money originate from Trinidad and invested abroad into soft currency investment, and therefore we are exposed to that risk.
Dr. Tiwari, let's shift gears here, so to speak, a bit on our program. Many economists, or not many, some economists would have suggested to the finance minister that he bites the bullet, cut some of the social programs, and by extension dip into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, more so to increase VAT from 12.5% to 15%. Do you think he will go that way?
Well, the first thing, I do agree with that the Minister of Finance has to bite the bullet. As I said, he's in a hard place and he has to bite the bullet. I think you should be judicious in the way you deal with the social programs, because you could cause a great deal of grief if you do not handle that with a certain sensitivity. And that is why I was suggesting to take the initiative that was done with the IDB and see where it is and try to use that as a guide in order to do a much more realistic and meaningful exercise. So I wouldn't say do away with a large number of social welfare programs. I would say be judicious in how you deal with that. I would say cut the subsidies to the state enterprises by 10%. Let them do with 90% of what they now get from the state, and let them find ways of making themselves more self-sustaining. And what's the other thing that you mentioned?
Talking the not the ease of doing business, because we would have addressed that already. We talk about cutting in social programs and most of the increase of VAT from 12.5% to 15%.
The increase in VAT to 15%, I don't know if, having just touched it a few years ago, you want to go and interfere with that again. The real problem is whether you make it a comprehensive consumption tax for everything that you buy, or if you do it the way we do, in which we are making a distinction between luxury items, hoping to get the money from there, and in which all basic foods, etc., are untouched by the VAT. So those are policy issues. My own feeling, you see, we were talking about it earlier, we are really living in a contradictory situation because of this COVID. You have a situation in which government, which should be small, has gotten bigger because of COVID. You have a situation in which people in an economy, in a society, and businesses, independent, private entities, etc., who should be more independent and self-sufficient, are now more dependent on businesses than ever. And you have a situation in which private employees, that's to say employees in the private sector, are in a situation where either their businesses need support or they themselves need salary relief. So government has not only gotten bigger, they have become more of a godfather in this kind of situation. And yet at the same time, in trying to organize a budget, you are looking at how to generate revenue and looking at one of your options as asking people to pay more taxes, when these are the same people that COVID has triggered a situation in which the government has to be helpful to these people. You see, and this is the dilemma. That is why I said that it begins with how you see the problem. If you see the problem as simply a pool of money, expenditure, revenue, deficit, etc., and you are making calculations on the basis of that, and then determining how you are going to make allocations, then it seems to me that operational view is going to be bound to get you in trouble. If you have a developmental view, you start with how the society is and what has happened because of COVID, and therefore what are the dire needs in the society, and therefore what is the effective role of government at this time. The effective role of government at this time is to prevent hunger and starvation, to ensure human survival, to create the conditions in which businesses can survive, in which businesses can recoup and retrieve themselves. And once you are able to do that, you want to grow the economy and make interventions to allow you to grow the economy. So I think how you identify the problem and the way you approach the problem is a big part of the kinds of solution that you would propose. And I would guard against an operational view of what is required, a mechanical operational view of what is required at this time. Because ultimately, you are dealing with human beings, human systems, and an economic system that is significantly dependent on the outside world and is significantly is waiting for propulsion from internal action. And you've got to find a formula to be able to deal with all of these things.
All right, you're looking about trying to find a formula, and you spoke about survivability. My take on this, and I'm targeting this to Ved this afternoon. Business survivability would be one of the challenges facing the Minister of Finance. We would have had a discussion. As I said, I would have spoken to various presidents of various chambers, and they were making the suggestion that maybe it's about time that the finance minister look at a business subsidy. Your take?
I am very concerned about it. First of all, we have to go through structural change. I think let's agree on a few things, and we can decide whether there is full agreement or maybe that is under debate. But we have to move away from oil and gas. Yes or no? I'm asking the question, is it yes or no? That we have to move away from oil and gas? And the obvious answer to me is yes.
Yeah.
Who will say no? Let's continue to depend on oil and gas. That's no longer, that ought to be no longer a question up for debate. We have to move away. So when we say we're moving away from oil and gas, we have to ask the other question: what type of economy are we going to? Dr. Tiwari mentioned a few things, digital economy, etc. I don't have a problem with that. But we have to say, okay, not a problem. If we go to that, where do we see Trinidad in the next few years? Can such diversification feed us? How many persons can that employ? And if they say, look, that will employ 100,000, let's go for it. But we have to come up with hard evidence, or do we want an experiment? Let's pumping money from there. Government is not in a position to give any subsidies again, so the private sector has to do it. The best the government could do is say, look, give incentives to say no taxes. Okay, the other area that is being looked at is our export sector. But in my view, and I would defer to other persons, our export sector depend on subsidies. Subsidies in the form of low gas energy prices, low water, low natural gas prices. And the evidence is already there, because when NGC wanted to raise the price of the natural gas, the export and manufacturing sector said, no, please don't do it. We'll have to close up shop. So we have to say, what economy are we looking at? You have to explain that and define that now. Only then we can talk about survivability. A lot of our companies, apart from the manufacturer, we do have local manufacturers, I'm not saying no, but a lot of our businesses are import oriented, and we cannot afford it anymore. If our foreign exchange go to zero, as it did in the early 1990s, then a lot of these businesses can no longer be sustained, and therefore it doesn't make sense government trying to sustain these businesses when they are sure to die. The probability of they going out of business is 95 to 100%. Why are you subsidizing that? What I would like to emphasize, the survival of a business is different than in employees, The employees has to be given some kind of sustenance over the period until, but parallel to all of this, we have to determine what new industries we should be moving at and creating jobs at the same time. We can create jobs, and the jobs have to be in agriculture, agro-processing, recycling. Those are the things we know that we can do. So we have to do that now to create new jobs. You don't want to shut down the civil servants. If IMF comes in, that's what they're going to do, by the way. IMF is going to come in. We're going, in my prediction, within 2 years, the Heritage and Civilization Fund is totally utilized. Totally, we have nothing. IMF is going to come in before that and start discussing with government how they should reduce civil servants, as they did in Barbados. They did it in 2 tranches, I think. So that's going to happen.
Ved, you would have read my mind, because I want to pose this to Dr. Tiwari here this afternoon. A report circulated last week, Dr. Tiwari would have stated that WASA is about 4,000 in workforce, overstaffed. And in his budget presentation 2021, Dr. Tiwari, do you anticipate the minister making any certain cutbacks to these entities, more so the utilities, WASA, TNTech, public servants and so on? Do you anticipate any sort of cutbacks in staff?
I mean, I don't see how we can continue to sustain
But this is a question I'm
some
asking
of those state enterprises. So what I'm saying is that rather than saying, 1,000 people from WASA will go home, what you do is that you make a cut to WASA in terms of subventions, and you let WASA organize its business. It can organize its business in terms of overtime management. It can other efficiencies. I'm sure they waste a lot of money. They probably rent cars and all kind. I mean, so I mean, I don't want to go into the details of that. There are ways of. So I would say that the Minister of Finance needs to make macro interventions to cause micro results. Okay? So, for instance, I mean, you have a country of 1.4 million people, but you have 14 local government areas plus Tobago under the House of Assembly. And you have 600 communities throughout Tobago and Trinidad. So if you want to create the conditions in which you affect 600 communities and 14 regions, and still at the same time manage your macro economic and macro financial considerations, then there are ways of doing that. I mean, I cannot tell the Minister of Finance how to do it here, but there are ways of doing that. It starts first with the consciousness. So if you know that there is a pre-vaccine period to COVID that will last as long as it takes a vaccine to be distributed, and therefore that places a limitation on world trade, world business, international logistics. It keeps the price of energy down. It keeps tourism dampened, etc. You know all of these things, the supply chain and so on. And you know that water and food are the basic necessities of life. And that you have assets in your country that are environmental in nature. You have liabilities in your country that are natural in nature, like when you get floods from clogged rivers, etc. Then spend your time doing that and employ people in labor-intensive work that can add value, so that when the vaccine comes and you are able to get your economy sort of moving again, you can leverage and take advantage of that, and all that pre-vaccine work that you did now counts for something, because you have created the opportunity for agricultural expansion, the end of flooding, you have housing construction with wastewater, with rainwater management and solar energy, etc. All of those things, and people, you get the thing working because you need people working to have consumer demand. And without consumer demand, your internal economy will not operate. All your businesses will be under pressure. You know?
Ved, I would have listened to you on your contributions for a long while now because you've been associated with this radio station for a very long time. And there's one area of concern which you would have always raised. And people in Trinidad and Tobago, they are afraid of this word, devaluation.
Yeah.
Is the devaluation coming?
I want to shift the real concern is inflation. Inflation. There's a difference, huh? There's a difference. What we ought to be concerned about is inflation, not devaluation. Not devaluation. And I'll tell you why. We can say devaluation. If devaluation is a bad word, then why don't we revalue the currency? And I've asked economists, I said, okay, some argue for devaluation, some argue for staying the same. I would like to see the group of economists saying, wait a minute, if staying the same, it would mean to say revaluation is better for us. Why don't we revalue the currency? We can revalue the currency. Why not? Nobody has determined. On international trade, these are known as currency war, and that is the big problem between America and China today. Because China is able to control the value of their currency and undervalue it. Undervalue it, meaning to say that they can sell their goods cheaper in the world market. And that's why they provide over 30% of the global trade in goods, you know, China, including agricultural goods, because they manipulate their currency and have it undervalued. Our currency is overvalued. What it means to say when we go forward, what's the point of having an overvalued currency when you cannot get US dollar to buy? You've held the currency, the rate at 6.7 or 6.8. The banks are fudging on all of this and are actually selling you US dollars at 7.5 because they say, I don't have money to lend you, to sell to you, but I could lend you in US dollars. And by the time you pay fees and everything, it's working out 7.5. So the market has a way of getting around these artificial restrictions. If you go and ask anyone who's brought in money, they're not going to sell you at the official rate. So that official rate is you can hold it official, but the actual market rate is far different. The purpose of having the correct valuation is that you are able to encourage local production and you are able to dissuade importation. Why to discourage importation when you can make? But the artificial rate that we have now, it is not going to stop inflation rate. What has happened to gasoline? It used to be $2 and something, now it's $4 and something. That's 100% inflation. That is what we should be worried about, the inflation rate. So, you know, we cannot move this economy and diversify this economy without the proper adjustment to the exchange rate. If you want to hold the exchange rate as is, there are two ways to encourage local production. One is a movement of the exchange rate to its proper value, and secondly is a negative listing. In other words, we are not importing tomatoes, period. I'm not giving you exchange money, US dollars, to import tomatoes. Barbados has done it. But soon as you raise that argument of a negative list, people say WTO will come on you. I haven't seen the World Tomato Association pointing out to Trinidad and coming in. This world has changed. And I am saying, okay, if that is the case, we are not giving you foreign exchange to make that import. If you have foreign exchange, you could bring in your Rolls Royce and you could bring in what you want. But we are not giving you foreign exchange to do those imports. And therefore, those two variables are the most important variables in diversifying the economy.
Dr. Theory, I want to get your take into this because it's a very significant conversation we are having here. Because money, the economy, the pros and cons, the impact, the negative, the positive of a devaluation, because that's the conversation I had this morning with one of our callers. He said that he's in know and he has information that a devaluation is coming. Share your thoughts with me.
Yeah, I don't know whether a devaluation is coming, but I do know for a fact that the Trinidad and Tobago dollar is overvalued. That was pointed out by the Fitch. I think it was the research unit of Fitch that put out a report which basically says it looked at what was happening in terms of the black market and so on, and basically indicated that the dollar was overvalued. And we know that in the black market you could get it, but for $8, $9, etc. And I mean, and in the banks, of course, there's great scarcity. You could hardly get $100, so that makes it easier for the black market to flourish. I think that is it's not a point for debate. The dollar is overvalued. The question is whether an official devaluation is going to cause a problem for us. And I think it's going to cause a problem because we produce very little of what we consume, and we consume a lot of what we do not produce. And I think you have a chicken and egg problem because you need the devaluation in order to increase your production and to increase your consumption of goods locally produced, and also to stimulate your export competitiveness. But you also, if you do it now when your import bill for food and other things is so high, then you have a problem of really cost of living, what Vade is talking
inflation.
About inflation.
Yeah.
Because immediately what it does, it reduces your purchasing power, and it limits your purchasing power because you can only stretch, the dollar will only stretch so far. So that is where the problem is, and my own preference would be for a holding of the devaluation issue until we could get agricultural production up, and meanwhile we could take other decisions with regard to foreign exchange. For instance, we can limit the foreign exchange for automobile imports, for instance. I think that is one of the things that we can do. We can also limit foreign exchange for franchises that are basically foreign franchises in Trinidad and Tobago. You don't starve them of all foreign exchange, but you limit what you are able to provide to them. Because while you have a Starbucks here, you also have rituals. One is local, one is foreign. And the franchises do cost, and the automobiles do cost, and they cost foreign exchange. The other thing that you can do also is to increase taxes on luxury items, of which certain types of automobiles may be part. And I think what that would do is to also limit the purchase and therefore the importation of these. Or you can do as Vade is suggesting, which is that you could buy a car if you want, but you're not going to get any foreign exchange to do it.
But do you anticipate? Okay, sure.
I feel that we have to do some of those things. If you don't create the conditions in which you can generate production and productivity and build export capability and restructure our dependence on energy and have new sources of foreign exchange flow. It's only a matter of time before the just under $7 billion in foreign exchange that you have is totally depleted. You cannot continue to import and produce little and expect the foreign exchange to remain there. It's going to disappear one day.
All right, gentlemen, let's pause there for a bit. I need to take some commercials. And when we come back, we'll continue with our discussion right here, 975 FM, Hot Like Pepper, our pre-budget discussion with former government minister, Dr. Botiwari, and former banker and economist, Ved Sriram. Stay with us here, 975 FM, Hot Like Pepper.
U975 Hot Like Pepper Multicultural Radio is now on Facebook. Like us, follow and share our page. We'll be sharing the latest news, tips, and much more. You can also view what's happening in our studio. Find us on YouTube and subscribe to our channel at RCL U975.
KY's Electrical Supplies Limited of Southern Main Road, Canupia, for all your plumbing and electrical supplies, water heaters, filters, and water pumps, plus all parts for Gould, Pentax, and Leo pumps. Choose from leading brands such as Cooper, Varma, BTCino, Leviton, and General Electric. Call 665-6954 for more information. KY's Electrical Supplies Limited of Southern Main Road, Canupia.
नबियों के सरदार मोहम्मद नबियों के सरदार
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and the blessings of Almighty Allah be upon each and every one of you. My name is Shazad Ali, and here's an invitation to join me every weekday morning, 5 o'clock, for the program Teachings of Islam, right here on U975 FM. Assalamu alaikum.
Republic Day. On U975 FM, we celebrate with you as we present One Nation, One Love, One People. It all goes down Republic Day, Thursday, 24th September 2020, from 6 a.m. to midnight. Strictly DJs, strictly local music, strictly vibes, and strictly the best. One Nation, One Love, One People. Look out! From 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., Sharon and DJ Vishal. 9 a.m. to noon, Beast Hi-Fi. 12 noon to 3 p.m., Captain Kendall. 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., the DJ Flavio Experience. 6 to 9 p.m., DJ Sean. And 9 p.m. to midnight, Corky D. Log on to www.975radio.com. Check us out on Facebook at U975 Multicultural Radio. This Republic Day on U975 Hot Like Pepper Multicultural Radio, a member of the Rhythms Communications Network.
It's the talk of the town. It's Talk It Talk on U975 FM, Monday to Thursday from 6 to 9 p.m. So join me, your host, Mukesh Baburam, on a 3-hour journey guaranteed to take your stress away. Remember, Monday to Thursday, right here on U975 FM.
This is Samaru Ramru inviting you on a journey down memory lane with enchanting songs on the program Nightline. Mondays to Thursdays, 9 p.m. to 12 midnight. Let your heart sing along with the music on U975 FM, Hot Like Pepper, Multicultural Radio.
Greeted in the wonderful name of Jesus. My name is Bishop Kelvin Khan from Endurance Ministry International. Our new location is in Railway Road, Londonville. You can tune into 97.5 every Sunday morning from 6 a.m. till 8. Tell your nanny and your nana, your chachi, your chacha, your grandpa, your grandma. We need to pray for our nation. God bless you. Thank you.
Make it your choice. Something for
97.5 FM, Hot Like Pepper, Multicultural Radio.
Power to the listeners.
Yes, it's 5 p.m. in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, please don't turn your dial. Yes, you're with our pre-budget discussion with my two guests this afternoon, and Dr. Bo Tiwari, former government minister, and noted economist and banker Ved Siram. We're talking budget 2021. We would have covered a number of areas of concern as it relates to this package. Note that this package will be presented to you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, by Finance Minister Colm Imber on the 5th of October. Gentlemen, before we went to the break, we were talking about the devaluation, and both of you would have given your take on devaluation. It's an area which people do not like to talk about, but it's a reality. And you would have described it as not really a devaluation. But what's the term you used, Ved?
Inflation.
Inflation,
We should
yes.
be concerned.
We should be very concerned about that.
Yeah.
Now, the Finance Minister, Dr. Tiwari, this headache which he has in preparing this package, note also to gentlemen that he will be engaging in a consultation with stakeholders to get their thoughts, to get their views going forward in the preparation of this package. Now, we spoke earlier, Dr. Tiwari, about the repercussions, the fallout, any sort of measure the finance minister would take in relation to looking at relief and social programs and so on. One of the items in our conversation this morning with two of my callers would have been the restructuring of URP and CPEP. Certainly that is taking out, that will take a toll or will impact on, let's say, our reserves. Your take on it, and then Ved, you can add your 2 cents to it. Dr. Tiwari.
Yeah, well, I mean, we find ourselves in a bad situation now because of the fallout from COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But URP and CPEP were both meant to be temporary things, sort of to tide people over until they could get into something
permanent,
something more permanent.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, really, something like CPEP and URP should have a training component in it. It should have a transition arrangement with it. And it should be a transition to productive, a build up of productive capacity with skills acquired and those arrangements made so that you move people from URP and CPEP, let's say, into manufacturing or to services or whatever else it might be, including a number of environmental jobs that could be asset building, all those things that I mentioned, which requires what you call labor intensive work and require asset building for when things become a little better, are things that you could use URP and CPEP for, and rather than and make them more productive. I don't want to make any comment on how productive they are now, but you could make them more productive and you could help them to build assets in this pre-vaccine time. But I think the ultimate aim should be to have this as something for temporary labor relief. And you target productive endeavors. There was a time when that labor used to be used for agricultural production. Something like that could be used again, perhaps much more strategically. So there was a time when you could perhaps use them in industry, and I think that could also be done more strategically. And as I said, there has to be a skills building component and an education and training component to have them transfer into productive activity. If you increase in the number of shifts in manufacture, etc., these people could be absorbed. Now, these things were in fact in discussion, and somewhere along the line they got lost. I remember in 2014 there was active discussion with the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association and some of the business organizations for this transition, but it did not get very far. And after 2015, we did not really hear about it anymore. But these are things that we must be doing. I think we have to use this very difficult time that we have in COVID now in order to do two things, which is build resilience and build sustainability. And we should understand that unless we focus on those two things, when things get better, we are not going to be that much better off if we do not manage things in that way.
All right. In times of plenty, Ved, commentators who would have spoken about the URP and CPEP, two relief programs. Ministers would have come, government would have come and gone, and yet they were a bit reluctant, for whatever reason, to touch URP and CPEP. Saving foreign reserves, looking out at our economy, making people more productive. Your take?
Yeah. I think it's a necessary program. Quite frankly, you just merge it into one. And we have spoken many times about it, not myself and you, but the country, whether how best to utilize that resource to rehabilitate our cocoa industry and coffee industry and so on. And that can be done. We could have planted hundreds, thousands of acres of trees over the last 15 years. We could have done it. So use the same resource that we have, work them half day, that's fine. The same pay, at least they're getting something to be done. It's a question of mobility to move them from one estate to the next. And there's a lot of land that is vacant that could be planted. The land now, you divide it into government land, and then you have private land as well. Let them be employed there, and government could actually take a portion of the produce to compensate for payment, as they did in Ecuador. And the professor was telling me, Professor Pat at the university, he said the cocoa yield in those countries are 15 to 20 times more than what we have here. What government did was to put together a group of persons who can actually work, and they share in the profits and the revenues of the estate. Wouldn't that be great? You have and some of these estates are very large, hundreds of acres, thousands of acres. You put people employed there, and we get the benefit of it. We said we can export all our cocoa. That's what they say. So therefore, that's a huge revenue earner. What we will be left with, if left unattended, we'll be producing one cocoa tree, but still be boasting we have the best cocoa in the world. What's the point in that, Ken? Put people to work. You know how many coconut trees they could have planted? You know how many mahogany trees they could have planted? And with regards to the sugar industry, get it started again on a holistic basis. People always shun. I'm making the point. You've raised gas 3 times already. No one rioted. Go and raise sugar prices twice, and let's produce it locally. Produce it locally, so that even if there's a devaluation, we're producing it locally. Prices are far better under control once you start producing locally. But there's thousands of persons you'll put to work. I looked at the rice industry. I'm not an expert in that particular industry, but if we had satisfied the local market to about 20% before, if we up it to 100% within 3 years, that's the goal. At least we'll have rice to eat. We will employ over 10,000 persons, and that is the kind of restructuring of the economy that is required. Instead of importing all the furniture and so on by courts and so on, we should be developing a local furniture industry of international repute. International repute meaning to say within 5 years we are aiming to be export ready. So many things to be done, Ken, and so it is such an exciting time. We can brood over it, we can cry over it, but I'm telling you, it's coming, and therefore we need to be very proactive with it.
Dr. Tiwari, exciting and challenging times ahead of us. You would have been a planning minister. The viability of the revival of the sugar industry, even more so for domestic consumption.
We could do it in a limited way. We couldn't do it like how you had, Carney Estate.
Tate and Lyle and so on. Yes, yes.
I don't think so. But you could do it in a limited way, and I would say keep the state out of it, and let private farmers be involved in it. And if it made economic sense to them, they would be willing to do it, because there is land that they have, it can be cultivated, land can be given out for the purpose, etc. It can be done. But I think that it must be done on a limited basis, and it must be done in terms of a quality product. It could be done as for a kind of niche market also. It could be done in terms of making of special products with that as an ingredient. I think the thinking has to be different, you know, in our time, for many of those traditional things that we might have developed before.
But Ved, you spoke about reviving the sugar industry in a
Yes.
limited form,
Yes.
maybe for domestic consumption. But that would have been put to rest, because I remember that Agriculture Minister Clarence Rambarat would have said emphatically there will be no revival of the sugar industry.
Yeah, obviously he doesn't understand agriculture, but let me expand on it and see if it makes sense.
Right.
Let me expand on it.
Beautiful.
It has to be done for local consumption. Let's look at that, right? We can set up 4 plants, crushing 1,000 ton a day, right, at different locations. But start with 1. With the bagasse we're using now to fuel the furnace, we're using natural gas. When I researched it, that's what Louisiana does. There's an abundance of natural gas. We're using natural gas in that, right? So we save all the bagasse to do several things. Several things we can do with the bagasse. 1, we can make bagasse board. We had a plant in the 1980s, and technology has advanced because the sucrose in it was still high. Technology has advanced, so we're making bagasse board on that, right? Then we're making feed for animals, and therefore we are going to support a dairy industry. Do you know what a pound for butter now? About $50-60 a pound. So why can't we have our own dairy industry? And we have developed the feed back with molasses, with that, and hops. So we have all the ingredients. You notice no imports so far, right? To have the feed. So then with the bagasse, you can make the best paper in the world for computer printout. And guess what you're going to do with that paper? You're going to set up a paper mill that we are exporting our waste paper now, you know. We are exporting it and then importing back fresh paper at a much higher price. Why can't we put a paper plant to use the bagasse plus this other paper that we're exporting into recycling? So we have a holistic industry. You know, the kind of foreign exchange we will be saving and the number of persons we'll be putting back to work. When you start off the sugar, and that's the big problem now, is that you have distanced the people who worked into sugar from the land. Before they would have their cows, before they would have their goat, before they would plant urdi in intercropping, and there was an attachment to the land. Go and see the sugarcane lands today. It's all abandoned. So if we are serious about diversification, these are industry on a holistic zero waste policy that we must pursue very aggressively. In 2007, I told Mr. Pandey about it. He went on the platform and said it. I also gave my recommendations to Kamala, and she has incorporated it into her. So what was required? I am saying, at least at this point, I should have generated enough interest for persons to come and examine it in great detail to see whether we should take the second step. With regards to the ownership, let government contribute the land and let private sector now come in to do the investment and operate. And this is where we put Trinidad back to work. At the moment, there's no plans by the PNM with regards putting people back to work. Road building, box drain building, houses, house construction, they are not putting people to permanent jobs.
Dr. Tiwari, as a former government minister, Minister of Planning at one time, there would have been much talk about a land use policy. Why the reluctance of not come up with a policy, land use policy?
Well, I mean, there might be the rudiments of a land use policy now, and that is the basis on which decisions are made for things like home construction, development, and stuff like that. But I think what you're talking about is a thoughtful, reflective look at land use policy in the country. There was a national spatial strategy done in 2013 that was laid in Parliament that still exists as a government document. And there have been, subsequent to that, plans developed, etc. But I think you're talking about a serious issue here, which is that we have a limited amount of land, and how we make judicious use of that land can really make the difference, not only in terms of economic viability and prosperity, but also address the issue of environmental conservation and sustainability. So I think, you know, we've got to start with the hills and determine what are we going to do and not allow to be done to the hills. So for instance, quarrying on the hills creates a problem. Building on the slopes creates a problem that ultimately results in rivers really being muddied, the flow of water, flooding, and causes a lot of problems really. So I think we have to make decisions about that, which is that the quarrying on the hills, I had in my time that you could not build above a 300 feet contour line on the hills. I don't know if that has been reversed or not. And you have a lot of slash and burn agriculture on the hills. And Vade was talking earlier about planting trees. Well, I mean, that's one of the things that we could do. And in always what you are doing, you have the immediate problem, which is how within your constraints do you do a budget for this year? But that budget has to be part of a plan. All right, you need, I would say, a 3-year plan with a fiscal plan for the 3 years, etc. And that is why last time I was here, I was saying that you needed to bring the multilaterals in. Because my own feeling is that you're going to have to dip into the HSF. Although you can't dip much anymore, because after $4.5 billion, you can't dip into it anymore, and we're almost there. And you are going to have to continue to borrow, despite the fact that the debt to GDP ratio is growing. The question is, how do you create the conditions in your plan to finally be able to live within your means? And secondly, how do you make government smaller by growing the private sector and growing private initiative in order to make your economy grow, and then begin the business of restructuring and diversification, etc. So you have export growth as well as local production, so that you increase the foreign exchange flow and the foreign exchange need for consumer products, okay? And I think that you always have to think of, well, how do I do this budget? How do I have a short plan, 3 years, to be able to do, so I locate this budget in a certain way. How do I finance it? But at the same time, you have a medium-term plan, smaller government, bigger private sector investment, more independent individuals, self-sufficient, more entrepreneurship, more business creation, all of these things. How do I infuse the society with the technology that is required, so that you have a medium-term plan, and then you have a longer-term plan, which is sustainability and built-in resilience. And I think that is the kind of thinking you need from government. Our tragedy is that our politics is too narrow and partisan. All right, so we fight each other for elections. Somebody wins. If another government was in there before, you abandon what that government did and you start a new project, so that there is no continuity, there is no building on what you have already created. And the partisanship does not cease to allow for enlightened parliamentary practice that would allow the country to progress, because you need policies for the country. You don't make policies by party. You might have competing policies when you are parties fighting election, and there may be things to which you are opposed in principle that you will not concede. All right, but by and large, there can be consensus building in policy, which is to say government has to give in, opposition has to give in, and the country has to buy in. And that's the other thing, which is that you have to govern not just in parliament, but you have to govern with the rest of society. The business people have to have confidence to invest. You need those people to be part of your policy and plan.
All right.
And I believe that you have to have that short-term view, that immediate-term view of 3 years, the medium-term view, and the longer-term sustainability view, or else you can't really make it for this country.
Well, Finance Minister Coleman would certainly have a challenge. It's not really the size of the budget or the expenditure, but how do you prioritize? So what are the priorities going forward for this government?
Right. The priorities, and this is where I'm glad Dr. Tiwari mentioned a question of policy. You cannot have a priorities without your policies. So what exactly are your policies? And only then you can determine what fits into that policy. And that's how you prioritize. So if the policy or the practice is just to try to balance your book the best you could, and how much money you could get from selling some Clico assets, how much money you could, and that's how they've been doing the budget for years. Let us see what's our minimum expenditure and look for capital expenditure, and let's see what assets we can sell. And we've been selling assets over the years, so the government can still go to the market and sell off FCB shares and perhaps raise about $2 billion again. So at the end of the day, they'll be deprived of all the future dividends that they were getting from these profitable enterprises. And so the question of priorities, I think this is my belief, and I could determine how best to judge a budget, but let's look at it afterwards, we'll talk. But how best to judge a budget must be with regards to an overall plan for diversification and putting people back to work. You have to look at the question of hunger. I hope they will identify soup kitchens and so on as strategic places in this country, because we are getting to that. Soup kitchens.
But where you're talking here about a scenario which would have faced us in 1986. Are there
no,
similarities?
Worse. Much worse. Much worse.
Well, let me get Dr. Tiwari take on this. Similarities in 1986?
No, much worse.
You would have been part of the government of that day?
Yeah, no, in 1986, the treasury was really empty. There was no question about that, which is why the NAR had to take the decision to go to the IMF.
With cola and what have you,
because you had no foreign exchange, and the treasury was in fact empty, so you couldn't even pay people in the government jobs.
You had negative listing and so on,
so you had to bring them in. This time is very different in the sense that, I mean, you still have
some liquidity.
Nearly $7 billion. You have about just over $5 billion in the HSF. And you have a situation in which you have capability to turn around local production and the reduction of imports in the country within a 12 to 18-month period. I think if you went about your business systematically, you could actually achieve that. And I think you also have an export capacity, productive capacity in, what can I say, in manufacturing that you could tap. The problem in energy remains. If prices go up, that would be a temporary fix, but I would not bank on it. I would say, thank God. We found new oil and gas, which would take us into the future, and we could plan with that in mind. But you also have the downstream industries collapsing, and you need to do things to stabilize that sector to keep certain things going. I mean, there's no question that there are things that you have to do to simply keep the economy going, to retrieve things, to recoup, etc., and things that you have to do to intervene for developmental purposes and structural transformation and diversification purposes. And as I said, you have to keep always the immediate, the short term, the medium term, the long term in mind. And I wish the government would take the view that, look, whatever we're doing in the budget is part of a 3-year plan, and they would share that plan with stakeholders, and both local and international. Secondly, they would develop a medium-term plan for the next 5 to 7 years, and I think that would be enough if they gave a vision of for sustainability and resilience, and you then understood where the environment fit, how you would deal with the hills, how you would deal with flooding, the rivers, how you would deal with coastal erosion and manage those things, so that you build a sustainable and resilient society and economy. And recognizing always that development is about people, and you have 600 communities, 1.4 million people. You have a census that was done in 2000, you have a census being done now. I don't know when we will get the results of that. And you have a map, a human development atlas done for the country in 2013, in which all the regions of the country are categorized in terms of assets and liabilities, human and other things, so that you could really use that as the basis for serious development if you wanted to. And really, as I said, things are hard and the choices are tough, but this really is a great opportunity, because in a way, we are starting from ground zero. And if we could use this as an opportunity, I think that we have much to gain over the long term. I didn't get into education transformation and all those things, but I think we have an opportunity with digitization to deal with all of those things.
With the scenario which we are operating right now, the environment which Trinidad and Tobago has now found itself, certainly presents an opportunity for good governance and for leadership in the country. I say this to you because one of the challenges facing the finance minister would be that of maintaining employment, raising revenue, and satisfying those relief programs. In your take, where is the minister going to get this much needed revenue to address all of these concerns?
I just want to differentiate between the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. That is at the discretion of the government to use. Whilst the law will say you're not allowed to go below a certain amount, they're going to come to Parliament and ask for that change.
Yes.
They're going to come.
And given the Dr. Tiwari, given the majority, just about 21 to 19, this piece of legislation, if it do come to the Parliament, it warrants a simple majority, yes?
Well, they may come and say, oh, a simple majority is all that is required. And they would be able to do it. So, I mean, if they want to use the money, they will use it. And the question is what is going to... The question is, even if you go to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund and you use more than more than was planned for use of that money, then you have to ask yourself, what are you doing in development terms, sustainability terms, in recovery terms, in growth terms? Because that is the only way it will make sense. Because if you deplete everything you have in the HSF, if you dwindle out your foreign exchange, if you're in a situation where you cannot earn foreign exchange and you're not producing a lot of the things that you consume, I mean, you might as well give up. You're going to end up being a basket case.
All right. So let's go back to the question here. Where is the minister hoping to get this much in the revenue?
They're going to take from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. They have a few assets they can sell.
Yeah, I think they should sell some assets.
They should sell out the assets. They made a very big mistake when they put together that fund for Republic Bank shares of twice the amount of the units that they're securing. That was a very bad mistake. I don't know if they can sell those shares now and get back $8 billion and satisfy the unit holders who had about $4 billion. So net they can raise about $4 billion there. I had gone to the last government as well and said, look, banks are owing back taxes because I consider it tax evasion, where they were using the CARICOM bonds as tax-free. They had about, at the time I calculated and submitted it to the government, that's it, PP government, it was about $8 billion they can get back from there. They have other monies to get back from a Petrotrin deal from Citibank. This 20 years now. But that was a fraudulent deal. We got legal opinions and everything, and Petrotrin was willing to go after it, but they were instructed by the minister to shut it down. All that money could be recaptured. So they have to be very aggressive now in collecting money, because that is taxpayers' money and they are sworn to protect the treasury. So there are monies to be had. But apart from all of that, the assets to be sold and so on. But you cannot do all of that without a plan. And therein lies Dr. Tiwari's view. You cannot do all of this without a plan, because when you're depleted from the cash, when it's all depleted, then what are you going to do the next year? Now, we cannot borrow indefinitely from banks. The banks already expressed concern at a 80 per debt to GDP ratio. I always laugh at this because they don't know how to calculate that ratio. They don't. So I make a joke out of it. But they said 80%, how their methodology to calculate it, and we are above 80%. So I would like the guy from Republic Bank, I forgot his name, he said he'll be worried at 80%, it's over 80%. Are you going to lend government money now? But the last point I want to make on this, your HSF is different to the country reserves. Government cannot just access that reserves. What they could do is borrow local TT dollars and go to central bank and buy those reserves. So they have some capacity to borrow locally to buy the reserves. But by and large, when you look at the credit rating of Trinidad and Tobago, we're clinging on by our fingernails. And I'm sure when the rating agencies come, they will say we are no longer investment grade. And therein lies a big problem.
You made a comment, or rather a statement very early in the program about IMF. Based on what you would have seen thus far, based on your research thus far, do you anticipate the IMF coming into the country within the next, let's say, year and a half or so?
I would say 18 months. We are a basket case, because with deficit of $20 billion every year, 20 billion, and unfortunately I got this article. Last year it was, for 2020 they estimate $27 billion in terms of subsidies. And deficit, in my view, they have not been under-reporting the deficit, about 20 billion. You cannot survive. Government cannot survive in its present form. They have to do something dramatic. And whatever is going to be done, it's a question of cutting costs. But in spite of all of that, they're required to create job opportunities. And that is where I'll be looking for in the budget. What are the job opportunities they're creating? And don't come to at least to me, to say you're going to build houses. Houses do not bring a return to government. houses do not bring a return to HDC. Just imagine HDC, I think government is still funding them. Government is giving them land to build houses, to sell, and we are still funding them. They should be self-sufficient now.
Dr. Tiwari, let's look at the bread and butter issues here. This package will be presented on the 5th of October. The normal man on the street, and this is a question for the both of you, right? I'm addressing it to the both of you. The normal man in the street is hoping that the minister does not touch his pension, does not interfere with his national insurance, maintain VAT as it is at 12.5%. Based on all that we would have discussed for the past 2.5 hours, Dr. Tiwari, what are your expectations?
I don't think they will touch pension. I don't know if they will increase VAT, given past policy, and given the fact that they did it around I think the middle of the administration last time. I don't know if they are going to do that. It is possible. It would be a 2.5% increase, I think. So it wouldn't be onerous. And I don't think that they are going to really interfere with basic social programs. But I think that there is room for maneuver, as I said, and at the end of the day, whatever you do, you have to make provision for investment, development, business growth, job creation. Okay? That is both your productive capacity and your revenue stream. And it also, depending on what kind of investment, it affects your foreign exchange inflows, and it also affects your export capability, depending on how you diversify your business investments and markets, etc. So I don't think we should lose sight of that, so that there's a development side to this, This is not just about marking time and dealing with income and expenditure. I mean, there is a place for that. The operational considerations are important. But a budget is a development tool, year by year. That is why it must be part of a plan. And that is why you must have a plan that is both short-term, medium-term, you have a longer view. And you also have a vision for where it is you're trying to take the country. All right, and that vision cannot be per capita income only. It has to be, for sustainability. It has to be for resilience. And because you could be doing something here now and a hurricane come, it wipe you out, you could get an earthquake, you're back to square one. And it also is preparing for the inevitable and managing risk. You have to be able to do that. And it always was, government always was a simultaneous equation. And it is becoming even more so now. You have to deal with a million things simultaneously. So you cannot be overwhelmed by this. You have to know in sequence how you are going to think through this development strategy.
All right, gentlemen, we're heading up to the hour of 6 o'clock, just about 21 minutes here to the hour of 6. Note that at the top of your hour, you can join Mukesh Baburam for his program. I'll come back to you, and of course, I'll open the lines because I know a number of callers would have been trying to get into the program this afternoon. My apologies for not accepting your calls, but I wanted to get as much as I can for you, the listening audience, from Ved Sriram and also from Dr. Bo Tiwari. Stay with us. Let's go to some commercials this afternoon, rather.
Kathy School Sport Enterprises Limited, number 86 Pearville, opposite the TSTT Exchange in Mayaro. We specialize in all types of meats, dry goods, liquor, beverages, ice, LPG, gas, motor oils, stationery supplies, and photocopying. We also provide rentals of tents and chairs for your every occasion. Come in and take advantage of our specials at reduced prices on liquor, wholesale, and retail. We are open every day, even on public holidays, for your convenience. TT Post services are available here at Kathy's School Sport Enterprises Limited of number 86 Pearville, Mayaro, where our friendly staff will be happy to serve you.
Attention all bakers, doubles vendors and roti makers. Try our high quality unbleached bromate free all purpose and baker's flour. Low price and conveniently packaged in 2 pounds, 2 kg, 10 kg and 25 kg bags. For wholesale and retail prices, contact Shiklisha Limited 665-3336 or visit us at Warrenville, Canupia. Shiklisha Limited, quality you can trust.
Kathy's School Sport Enterprises Limited, number 86 Pearville, opposite the TSTT Exchange in Mayaro. We specialize in all types of meats, dry goods, liquor, beverages, ice, LPG, gas, motor oils, stationery supplies, and photocopying. We also provide rentals of tents and chairs for your every occasion. Come in and take advantage of our specials at reduced prices on liquor, wholesale, and retail. We are open every day, even on public holidays, for your convenience. TT Post services are available here at Kathy's School Sport Enterprises Limited of number 86 Pearville, Mayaro, where our friendly staff will be happy to serve you.
For quality items, visit Super Quality Supermarket of Endeavour Road, Chiguanas, and Trin City Industrial Estate in Trin City, as well as Quality Cash and Carry Supermarket, Cuba Car Park, for all your grocery items, liquor, fresh fruits, and vegetables, not forgetting their bed and bath section, and kitchen appliances for your home. With so many items to choose from, take advantage of our great prices and discounts at any of our 3 locations: Trin City Industrial Estate in Trin City, Endeavour Road, Chiguanas, and Cuba. For quality items, Super Quality Supermarket and Quality Cash and Carry Supermarket.
This is Samaru Ramru inviting you on a journey down memory lane with enchanting songs on the program Nightline. Mondays to Thursdays, 9 p.m. to 12 midnight. Let your heart sing along with the music on U975FM, Hot Like Pepper, Multicultural Radio.
Republic Day. On U975 FM, we celebrate with you as we present One Nation, One Love, One People. It all goes down Republic Day, Thursday, 24th September 2020, from 6 a.m. to midnight. Strictly DJs, strictly local music, strictly vibes, and strictly the best. One Nation, One Love, One People. Look out! From 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., Sharon and DJ Vishal. 9 a.m. to noon, Beats Hi-Fi. 12 noon to 3 p.m., Captain Kendall. 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., the DJ Flavio Experience. 6 to 9 p.m., DJ Sean. And 9 p.m. to midnight, Corky D. Log on to www.975radio.com. Check us out on Facebook at U975 Multicultural Radio. This Republic Day on U975. Hot Like Pepper Multicultural Radio, a member of the Rhythms Communications Network.
Yes, indeed, and welcome back to our pre-budget discussion with economist and banker Ved Siriram and former government minister Dr. Bu Tiwari. Well, gentlemen, we would have touched on a number of areas of concern, more so as it relates to budget 2021. When we went to that break there, Dr. Tiwari, I was mentioning to you this scenario in which the government would have now find itself the entire environment, would now present a situation, or rather a challenge, to test the leadership of this administration, more so that of Dr. Keith Rowley and Finance Minister Colm Imbut. Your take?
Yes, I think this situation does provide conditions for a test of leadership. And I think that the way one passes this test, I think this first budget is going to be a major hurdle, all right, because a lot of people are waiting to see, first of all, whether it would be a continuity from the past, things go on as usual, or whether this is going to be a point of departure, but also a fresh start, a different disposition, a different approach. And I think that's going to be the first thing to solve as part of the test. So my own preference is for them to try to make a fresh start, to understand that this is the beginning of a new 5 years, not the 6th year, and on that basis make thoughtful decisions. The second thing is that I think that people would want to be comforted and they have their confidence built no matter what decisions the government took. So it's not so much the decisions that they would take, but the implication of those decisions for the consciousness of the population, whether they would feel comforted and they would have a sense of confidence that the government knows what it is doing. And the only way that they would know that the government knows what it is doing is if the government is able to explain what it is doing now in the context of a short-term plan, let's say over the next 3 years. That is to say, we are doing this because this is where we are headed, and this is how we are likely to sequence our action over the next 3 years. I think a lot of that confidence would also be built if the government told the population, we are going to come back to you, especially the major stakeholders, and keep this dialogue going so that we can engage each other, modify if necessary, etc., as we go along, as we monitor. And also, if they brought the multilateral agencies in, if they brought the assessment agencies, that's to say the, the Moody's and the Standard & Poor's and so on, if you brought them in and people understood that you were doing things in a very transparent way. And I think finally, if they outlined a vision for how they see the country moving forward, and it made sense in the context of what they are doing in this budget, the short-term plan, and the actions that they are taking to support the business of governance going forward. I think if they did that right, they would come through the leadership test with flying colors. I think if they tried to bramble the population, if they tried to bamboozle the population, if they come with, I mean, sorry to say, I don't know if I could say that on the radio, but bullshit of one type or the other, if they tried to pretend that things are better than they are, and that they're more in control than they are, and that they have things in hand, when in fact everybody knows that nothing is going to be settled unless there is a vaccine. Everybody knows that this community spread that we are having now is a problem that needs to be managed, and you cannot really predict what is going to happen. And everybody is uncertain about what is going to happen until this vaccine is found, because we could end up with closing the economy again. I think if they try to bramble the population that way, they are going to lose points, and their leadership is going to collapse when they present a budget in that context. And the realities over the next several months show that they did not come with, they failed the test of leadership, and they came to the country with a bramble rather than with a clear path forward where they knew what they were doing and where they were taking the country.
Ved, your take on my final question or concern to you. Come clean with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Do not make popular decision, but make decision that's in the best interest of all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Bite the bullet, make decisive action that could impact positive on the people of Trinidad and Tobago in these challenging times.
Yeah, I think the formula for us getting through this tumultuous time is for the government to come clean with the population.
Yes,
there's no time.
transparent.
There's absolutely no chance of you getting away otherwise. They must also incorporate a plan to reduce costs for central government, because I make the point that any person who is not working and getting paid is because somebody is working and not getting paid, and that is the nature of our democracy. Government is much too large. The other point, they cannot be instituting policies where you shut down businesses and do not give them some kind of financial support, whilst you are letting the civil servants not come to work and getting their full pay. They have to deal with it. They have to deal with it. At the same time, they are faced with the challenge of creating long-term employment, and that is where new industries to start up. So you cannot come on one hand to look at balancing your budget in terms of revenues and expenditure, what assets to sell and so on, without creating employment. Unemployment is the largest threat to Trinidad. Hunger will be the largest threat. The next, plus the poverty levels will be very high. This is a crisis situation, and leadership, you cannot delegate leadership at this point in time. The Prime Minister has to take the bull by the horns, and he has to recognize it's a warlike situation. And that's why I'd written about it. I said, where are our Churchills? Where's the leadership of that stature? Because you cannot go to rest and play golf when the ship is rocking in a very rough sea. And the country is looking for leadership. You've won the election, that's fine, but now you have to roll up your sleeves and come with us with a firm plan, so that, as Dr. Tiwari said, we must have some level of confidence. But to institute any program, austerity program, you have to start cutting from on top. So I, as Prime Minister, I have agreed to cut my salary at 25%. The Prime Minister of New Zealand just did that. What is so difficult to understand? Austerity measures, you cannot tell the population, tighten your belt. Most of us have sold our belt in destitution. We don't have belt to tighten again. We don't have food to eat. You cannot come and tell me tighten my belt, and you are enjoying the luxury of whatever is left of the carcass that we're looking at as Trinidad and Tobago. This is very serious, and I cannot. That is subject to debate, but in my view, it is very serious. I've been seeing this problem for the last 6 years.
All right, Ved, thank you very much. Dr. Tiwari, thank you very much for being part of the program.
And thank you very much,
afternoon.
Henrik, and thanks to all your listeners for listening.
Yeah, it is quite a challenging and troubling times ahead. We hope that good sense can prevail, and Finance Minister Colm Imbert can make the decisions that are in the best interest of all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Gentlemen, it has been a very long day for me. Thank you very much for being in the studio with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Looking forward to your company
Thank
again
you.
sometime in the future. Folks, that's it for our program for this afternoon. Pre-budget discussion with Dr. Butiwari and, of course, Ved Sriram. Up next, Mukesh Baburam. Stay with us here, 975 FM, Hot Like Pepper. Good afternoon, everyone. But I leave you with this.
Pieces, and it didn't look as if this will ever stop. So I'm going wrong and salvage all them diseases, and I'm opening a human body parts shop.